So this video is gonna make people like vomit in their mouths.
Yeah, probably so. Ugh, Rafi and Klee, disgusting.
You guys are so lovey-dovey.
Rafi's Rambles, Rafi's Rambles, Rafi's Rambles.
Hola, you amazing artist, and welcome to this very dreary day today, where plumbing is not getting done. We got a fun question from Megadose, the outsider artist, and I wanted to answer that in this video. Me and my hubby are artists just like you two, and we share a studio. You both seem like you never argue, but we do, lol. We were wondering if you guys in real life argue. Rafi is teased about Klee stealing his brushes, which does happen. So you like stealing my brushes?
It's not a matter of like, it's really more a matter of necessity. The needs of the many.
Oh my. But in reality, when I mess with hubby's brushes, it becomes a whole thing, but then we laugh about it later. What about you guys? That is a great question because it does bring up studio etiquette. So here we are in our studio space.
Our future studio.
It's not much right now.
I guess it still is technically our studio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so here we are in our studio. Technically. Yes, indeed, Klee does steal my brushes, and yes, indeed, there are times where she's taking over the entire studio with all her jewelry stuff.
Taking over the studio with my jewelry stuff.
I mean, yeah, your entire space just gets bigger and bigger.
You do recall the Rafi bin ratio and the Klee bin ratio on our recent move to this house, right?
I mean, no. I don't know what you're talking about. But do we argue about that? I don't think so. See, our story goes back to when we first met and our epic adventure around the country. I feel like Klee and I, since the beginning, have pretty much lived in small, tight spaces. When we first met, at one point before we left on our trip, for about 6 months, we were living in a pop-up camper in a friend's yard.
Yeah, living in the pop-up camper was great. Honestly, the only thing was like whenever someone knocked on the door of the pop-up camper, then both of us were like...
Then we hit the road for 2 years, and we literally lived in the back of a 92 Ford Explorer. That was our living space.
There was an adjustment period early on living in the Explorer, and mostly that had to do with like my unreasonably sized bag of yarn that I took with me.
That's right.
Which would have been justifiable if I liked knitting.
There was a giant suitcase full of costumes.
And I was like, I need this! And I also brought clothes for multiple people.
Your bin for the clothes was definitely much bigger than my bin.
So I guess there was a little bit of getting used to things and purging things.
Yeah, we did purge a lot. Mm-hmm. I think that was good for us on the road that we purged.
Speaking of purging, that really was the one major issue in the Explorer was when either one of us had gas.
She says either one of us, but we know. Obviously, you guys know that in Florida, we were pretty used to living in tight spaces and sharing a studio, a very small studio. In fact, it's interesting because now that we have a bigger space, we actually still work in the same rooms. So we're very used to sharing a space and we're pretty good at it. But the question isn't like, how good are you guys at sharing your space? The question is, are there ever any arguments?
Are there ever any arguments in the studio? No, not really. So when I need something from Rafi's side of the studio, pretty much what he sees is like me over on his side looking completely lost.
She looks lost.
And he'll look up from whatever he's working on and be like, what are you doing? What do you need? And I'll be like... I do plunder his things with his permission.
Basically anything you need. Other than there is some things... There are there is a very tiny collection of brushes that I'm like, these are my expensive brushes. Don't use these on your piddly little projects. I think when you're sharing a creative space, it is interesting because I think individually you become a little bit territorial, but after you've been working that same space day after day after day, everything on my side of the studio, if Klee needs to use it, she can. Pretty much the same goes for when I go into her studio.
You know, I don't really ever see you physically plundering my studio area. You do it in secret, I feel like. But what I do find is evidence that you were there. You use the things and then I think you forget where I keep them.
Never happened.
And then you just kind of leave them. Or I'll find like...
Never happens. I never go in your side of the studio.
I'll find like little Rafi metal filings from like something that he needed to file.
Never happened. Also, since we share a studio and we hang out and do a lot of things together, there could be times where like, you know, I'm a big hermit. Like I like staying at home, and so does Klee. But Klee, for a while there, tended to have a lot of, like, business things.
Mostly, I disrupt Rafi's workflow by forcing him to go places. Mm-hmm. He'll be, like, in the flow of working on stuff, and I'll be like, this week I need to go to Pops' studio to cast.
So many meetings.
Yeah. I would make you go to the gallery. I would make you go to meet. Well, I didn't make you go because we like to do the thing.
Yeah, we like doing the things together, so it was fun going. But, you know, getting me out of the house,
I feel you.
That's the challenge.
I mean, I didn't necessarily want to do the things, but I...
Then why do them? She's making me go to all the places all the time.
I make Rafi go to all the places because I'm a real business person. I have business matters to attend to all the days.
I'm a real business person.
Rafi did like to jokingly give me a bunch of grief for it. Like every time he's like, why are you always making me go places? Especially if it was early in the morning. And he's a morning person.
Yeah.
So it really didn't make sense, but he'd be
like... It was the principle of the thing. A lot of times the amount of studio that gets divided is unfair. And that changes depending on what projects are going on.
On occasion, one of us completely and utterly disrupts the studio for everyone.
Usually it's me.
Usually it's you.
Yeah.
My disruption happens in other ways, but like, remember when you were working on the piece for Oren? Mm-hmm. It literally took up the entire studio. Everything had to get moved, and my bench was completely blocked off. So like, for the duration of the Oren project, I pretty much had to find other things to work on besides jewelry.
Yeah, and that was a big project, so it took a while.
Yeah.
I do apologize about that.
We worked around it.
We did. There are those things that are off limits. For example, when we were living at my dad's house, anytime that I would go into the studio and if there was something missing or something moved around, I knew that my dad was the one that was going in there and grabbing stuff randomly because he was working on some tool or something like that.
Oh, yes. Other people entering the art studio. Especially, like, in the case of your dad, like, he would do that in secret, too. Like, we wouldn't be in there, and you knew that he'd been in there.
Oh, man.
Because...
You knew. My outdoor studio, there was one day where, like, he was gone for a while. Like, I couldn't see him outside, you know, and it was all quiet. I was like, what is going on? And I went out into my outdoor studio, and it was covered in pieces of styrofoam.
Like a styrofoam thing exploded.
Yeah, like an explosion of styrofoam. And I was like, what is this?
And he was always like, what?
What? I don't know.
I couldn't really complain too much when he plundered my jewelry bench because, like, a lot of my stuff was his.
Well, yeah, from back in the day, I complained. I did a lot of, I was like, stay out of our studio. Don't touch things. It's one of those things that, for the most part, if she does need a brush or something and she does come in, she'll ask, you know, like, could I have one of these brushes? And I'll just go through my brushes and give her one. Or if I need to use something, I'll go over to her space and I'll ask because I know that she has it organized a certain way.
Over the years, we've gotten really good at communicating, like, these brushes and materials are off limits. Mm-hmm. Don't paint with these for your project because you don't know how to paint and you'll use the whole thing.
I would never say something like that. I might be like, this tube of paint is extremely expensive. Do not use my tube of paint.
That's more self-imposed guidelines. I suppose I have a couple things that I'm slightly territorial over, like my steel blocks that I hammer on. I got the texture like just so on those blocks from like all the hammer strikes. When you would borrow my steel block for like your art print stuff,
yeah,
I'd be like, ooh, it's gonna have like different texture than what so eventually there was just magically another steel bench block in the studio that had been ordered.
My steel block. I was like, ooh, thanks. At the end of the day, when I think about whether or not we argue in the studio, like honestly, nothing ever really comes up. And we do work on a lot of projects together when we're working on music, artwork, any of the projects that we're working. I love having Klee in the same space, just her energy. Even if we're sitting there working on our individual projects, not doing anything, I do love that.
Yeah, honestly, the only time either one of us got like genuinely upset, but more in a sad way, was when the other one wasn't there because for some reason we had to go do separate stuff.
Yeah, I know. That sucked.
Space or materials or any of that stuff is really just not a problem because above all else, I love sharing my studio with my person.
Yeah, me too.
People out in audience land are like, blah! You guys are disgusting.
They're so lovey-dovey. So yeah, there you have it. At the end of the day, we don't really argue about our shared creative space because, you know, we've been doing this for a long time.
Honestly, I think one of the biggest sources of like over the years has been like bathroom time.
Klee spends a lot of time in the bathroom. Right before this video, she was in there for an hour.
It was not.
And that's it, you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed hearing a little more insight into our creative studio habits with one another. And I'm curious to know about your studio habits and how you feel about your stuff, whether or not you share a studio or if you don't share a studio, and how you feel about people coming in and like grabbing your stuff. I know that when it's not Klee, I'm not happy about that. But yeah, go ahead and leave that in the comment section below. I would like to give a big thank you to our patrons. It's their support that allow us to do these videos. And I would like to give a big shout out to Rachel Kerr, painting pet portraits, people portraits in acrylic and oils, landscapes in watercolors, and also she designs merch that she has online. Check her stuff out. She is really freaking awesome. And I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you Megadose, the outsider artist, for such a fun question. Have fun. Keep laughing about it afterwards because it's all fun and jokes until somebody steals your brushes. All right, so I'm about to end this video. You want to say goodbye to our peeps?
Of course. Good day.
Thank you all so much for watching. You guys are absolutely amazing. I totally adore you. And if you never watched us before and would like to subscribe, go ahead and click right over here. And that's it. I will talk to you later. Adios.